He was a millionaire accustomed to controlling everything and everyone with a single glance. She, a young virgin cleaner who should never have stepped on that forbidden floor. He gave her an hour to surrender to his whims, but she only needed 5 minutes. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave your comment saying where you're listening to this beautiful story from. We continue. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We will keep going. On the silent terrace of a skyscraper in the Upper East Side, New York City, where every wall exhales power, solitude, and memories hidden under imported Italian marble, Matthew Velarde contemplates the metropolitan horizon. At 43, he is the kind of man who transformed pain into an empire, guilt into method, and remorse into unbreakable contracts. Owner of one of the country's largest private hospital networks, his name evokes fear in corporate meetings. His presence is scarce, and his eyes cold as tempered steel. No one truly knows him, not even himself. From his penthouse on the 49th floor, Matthew observes the lights of the city that never sleeps. Fifth Avenue traffic stretches like a river of red and white lights. The night breeze brings aromas of jacarandas and street tacos from the nearby neighborhoods, but he remains immune to such worldly pleasures. The Velarde Empire occupies 3 full blocks, an imposing architectural complex that symbolizes his success and, simultaneously, his prison. 27 years ago, Matthew watched his younger brother, Edward, fall unconscious before his eyes, drowning in the family estate's lake in Lake Tahoe, California, while he at 16 decided to test the boy's limits of obedience. "Hold on for 1 more minute underwater, Eddie," he had said. "Velarde men are not afraid." When he pulled him out of the water, Edward was no longer breathing. Doctors managed to resuscitate him, but the brain damage was irreversible. Since then, his brother exists as a shadow in a private clinic in Palm Springs, California, fed by tubes and machines that Matthew pays for religiously, though he never visits. The family disintegrated after the tragedy. His father, Mr. Henry Velarde, a respected landowner from the Texas Hill Country, died of a heart attack 3 years later. His mother, Carmen, took refuge in Europe, unable to look the son who had destroyed her youngest in the eye. Over time, Matthew silenced the guilt through discipline, absolute control, emotional distance. He created a medical empire focused on profitability and performance, not on compassion. And it was on that altar of steel and glass where he buried all the humanity he had left. The phone vibrates in the pocket of his tailor-made Armani suit. It's Danielle Mondragon, the executive vice president of Velarde Hospitals, and his occasional lover. He ignores the call. He has no time for carnal pleasures tonight. Quarterly reports show an anomaly in the main hospital's oncology department. Too many resources allocated to terminal patients, too much compassion turned into red numbers. Matthew does not tolerate losses. His office occupies half of the 49th floor, a fortress of glass, steel, and technology, where he makes decisions that affect thousands. His black obsidian desk is impeccable. Not a single personal photograph, not a single memory. Only framed diplomas, business awards, and a small bronze sculpture, depicting a child looking at the horizon, the only silent witness to what once was. As he reviews the figures on his tablet, he notices something unusual on the security cameras. An unknown figure on the 47th floor, a restricted area after midnight. He approaches the touch screen integrated into the wall. With a swipe of his fingers, he zooms in on the image. A young woman in a cleaning uniform, black hair tied back in a braid, petite build. She shouldn't be there. "Security," he speaks into the intercom. "There's cleaning staff on the 47th floor after hours." "I'll check." "Mr. Velarde," a male voice responds. Minutes later, the head of security, Robert Calder, a former military man turned corporate bodyguard, informs him. "She's a new hire, sir. Solange Gutierrez, 26 years old. The automated system had a glitch and sent her to executive floors. We're redirecting her now." Matthew frowns. He detests glitches. His entire life is built on infallible systems, perfect processes, absolute control. A simple anomaly can trigger catastrophes. He knows it better than anyone. "Check the system, and have the Human Resources Department send me her complete file first thing tomorrow." He doesn't know why he asked for this information. Perhaps it's fatigue, perhaps the date. Tomorrow marks exactly 27 years since Edward's accident. 27 years of nightmares, where the water turns red and childlike eyes look at him with reproach from the bottom of the lake. Sometimes, on the worst nights, Matthew swears he can hear his brother calling him from the depths of sleep. He returns to the terrace. New York City stretches before him like a carpet of lights, indifferent to his personal dramas. Battery Park in the distance, Central Park nearby, the nightlife of the West Village and Soho, an empire of asphalt and nostalgia, coexisting with his own empire of glass and pain. He pours himself a glass of aged mezcal, his only vice apart from work. The smoky taste reminds him of the bonfires they made at the estate, when his father roasted corn and told stories of the revolution. The intercom rings again. "Mr. Velarde, I apologize for the interruption." Robert's voice sounds tense. The cleaning employee is now on the 49th floor. The system keeps sending her to restricted areas. Matthew freezes, the mezcal glass halfway to his lips. How on earth did she get up here? "Where exactly is she?" "She just entered the hallway leading to your office, sir." "I'm sending 2 officers to intercept her." "No," Matthew says, surprising himself. "Let her come." "Sir?" "That's an order, Robert. I'll handle it." He cuts the communication and heads to his office. He sits in the Italian leather executive chair, back to the door. A studied, dominant posture. From the monitors, he can see the woman advancing down the hallway with a cleaning cart and a confused expression. She stops in front of the smoked glass door with the Velarde Hospital's logo engraved in silver. She hesitates. She consults the digital device on her wrist, where she apparently receives instructions. She takes a deep breath and pushes the door open. Matthew can smell the nervousness, mixed with a faint aroma of vanilla and industrial soap. He doesn't turn around. He lets the silence do its work. He hears her enter, the soft squeak of the cleaning cart's wheels, her held breath. "Good evening," she finally says, her voice firm, contradicting her obvious discomfort. "Excuse the interruption, sir. The system sent me here, but I can come back later." Matthew slowly turns the chair. He observes her. She is more interesting than he expected. Not conventionally beautiful, but there is something magnetic about her presence. Large amber eyes that do not drop their gaze before him. High cheekbones, full lips that do not smile, but also do not tremble. A small vertical scar above her left eyebrow. Small but strong hands without rings or nail polish on her short nails. "No one enters this floor without my express authorization," he says in a controlled voice. "Especially at this hour." "I know, sir. As I said, there seems to be a system error. If you prefer, I can leave right now." There is no fear in her voice, only pragmatism. That irritates and intrigues him in equal measure. People usually tremble before him. Directors, doctors, politicians, everyone. This woman in a grey uniform looks at him as if he were any other executive, not the man who could fire her with a snap of his fingers. "Do you know who I am?" he asks, leaning back in his chair. "Matthew Velarde," she replies without blinking. "Founder and president of Velarde Hospitals. And yet you entered my private office at midnight. The system directed me here. And the door wasn't locked," she argues. "If you tell me where the error is, I can report it to the supervisor tomorrow." Matthew smiles, but the gesture doesn't reach his eyes. "What's your name?" "Solange Gutierrez, sir. Solange, an interesting name for someone who breaks into places where she shouldn't be." She doesn't respond to the sarcasm. She simply waits, the cleaning cart as a barrier between them. The bluish light of the city streams through the windows, casting strange shadows on both their faces. For an instant, Matthew has the feeling of having lived this moment before, a sense of déjà vu that makes his skin crawl. "I propose something to you, Solange Gutierrez," he finally says, rising from his chair. "A game." Solange's eyes narrow cautiously. She has known enough men with power to recognize when one is trying to play with her. In her 26 years of life, she has learned that the games of the powerful always have invisible rules, designed so that they never lose. "I'm not here to play, Mr. Velarde," she responds calmly. "I'm just doing my job." Matthew slowly circles the desk like a predator assessing its prey, but Solange does not back down. She stands firm, her chin slightly raised, her shoulders straight under the oversized grey uniform. "Your job is to clean where you are told," he says, stopping a meter away. "And now I'm telling you to listen to me. You have 1 hour to impress me." "Excuse me?" "1 hour. Matthew repeats, checking his platinum watch. If you manage to capture my interest, you'll keep your job and perhaps get something more. If you fail, you'll be looking for work elsewhere tomorrow. Indignation ignites Solange's amber eyes. This man represents everything she detests: arrogance disguised as authority, power mistaken for entitlement. But she needs this job more than ever. She cannot return to Florida empty-handed, not after all the promises she made to her mother before the illness consumed her. "And what exactly must I do to impress you, Mr. Villard?" she asks with a tone that dances between forced respect and subtle irony. Matthew smiles. He likes this game. It's not what you think. "I don't want your body," he clarifies, as if offering her a great favor. "I want to see what's behind those eyes that look at me without fear. I want to know who Solange Gutierrez really is, and why she ended up cleaning floors in my building at midnight." The proposal disconcerts her. She expected something more predictable, but this is different. This man doesn't want what others have tried to take. He wants something she has never shared with anyone: her story. "My story isn't interesting, Mr. Velarde, and it's definitely not worth the fortune you pay per hour." "I'll decide what's interesting and what isn't," he states, pointing to a minimalist white leather sofa by the window. "Sit down." It's not an invitation. It's an order. Solange hesitates. To leave the cleaning cart, to sit on that immaculate sofa with her uniform impregnated with bleach and detergents, would be to cross an invisible line. She would no longer be the employee following orders, but the woman accepting a perverse game with the boss. "I prefer to stand," she replies. Matthew nods, as if her resistance confirmed something he already suspected. "As you wish. You know, most people would do anything to please me. I have that effect on people." "Perhaps you haven't met the right people, sir." The answer, as simple as it was accurate, struck Matthew with unexpected force. When was the last time someone spoke to him with such frankness? His subordinates tremble before him, his lovers feign admiration, his business partners calculate every word. No one challenges him, no one holds a mirror up to him. "Tell me about your mother," he says, suddenly changing strategy. Solange's face transforms. A shadow of pain crosses her features, so quickly that anyone less observant than Matthew would have missed it. "My mother is not part of this conversation." "Everything is part of this conversation," he insists, pouring himself another glass of mezcal. "Do you want one?" She shakes her head. "I don't drink when I work." Admirable. Most people in this city live to escape their responsibilities, not to honor them. Solange observes the city through the window. From this height, New York City seems like a parallel universe, so distant from the reality she knows in her small shared apartment in Queens. Every morning she takes 2 buses and the subway to get to the hospital, where her mother received treatment until resources ran out. Later, when she was offered the night job at the Velarde corporate building, she accepted without hesitation. The pay was better, the nights lonelier, and the ghosts less noisy. "My mother was a seamstress," she finally says, surprising herself. "The best in Key West, Florida. She made wedding dresses so beautiful that people came from other towns to find her. She had magic hands." The use of the past tense does not go unnoticed by Matthew. Was. Solange nods slightly, offering no further details. She is not ready to talk about how Madame Hope Gutierrez, the woman who taught her to read by candlelight when there was no electricity, who told her Zapotec legends while embroidering, ended her days in a hospital bed, consumed by cancer that was detected too late. She will not talk about how resources ran out when they needed them most, nor about how the experimental treatment that could have given her a few more months of life was cancelled due to resource optimization. She will not mention the name that appeared at the bottom of the document, informing them that the palliative treatment protocol would not be renewed. "Monsieur Villard, Executive Director. My mother died 3 months ago," she says in a controlled voice. "Terminal cancer." Matthew offers no empty condolences. Something in him seems to understand that they would be an insult to this woman. "In our hospitals?" he asks with seemingly genuine interest. "Yes, at Velarde Hospital in Greenwich Village." Matthew nods, processing the information. Something doesn't fit. A cleaning employee whose mother was a patient in his facilities? Company policies discourage such emotional connections. They could compromise staff objectivity. Someone in human resources made a mistake in hiring her. A mistake that, for some reason, doesn't bother him as much as it should. Cancer is a terrible business, he says, looking at his mezcal glass. On the one hand, treatments generate significant revenue. On the other, terminal cases are financially unsustainable in the long run. The coldness of the comment hit Solange like a slap. This man talks about the disease that consumed her mother as if it were an accounting balance sheet. Cancer is not a business, Mr. Velarde. It is human suffering. All suffering has a price in this world, Solange. The difference is that some can pay it and others cannot. The words float in the office's air conditioning, laden with a cruel truth they both know too well. Solange feels rage building in her throat. She cannot afford the luxury of indignation. Not when 6 people depend on the salary she earns cleaning the floors. This man doesn't even tread. "How long have I been here, Mr. Velarde?" she asks, changing the subject. Matthew checks his watch. 20 minutes. "Good. I have 40 more minutes to impress you according to your rules," she says, with renewed determination. "Do you mind if I continue cleaning while we talk? It's what I'm paid for, after all." Without waiting for a response, Solange returns to her cart and takes out a cloth and a spray bottle. She begins to methodically clean the glass shelves, where Matthew displays his business awards. She does it with precision, without hesitation, with movements that reveal years of practice in the art of maintaining order in other people's spaces. "Interesting approach," he comments, observing her with curiosity. "Most would try to please me with dramatic stories or flattery." "I'm not most people," she replies simply, "and you don't seem like the kind of man who is easily impressed by tears or compliments." Matthew approaches, reducing the distance between them. The scent of his expensive cologne mixes with the smell of glass cleaner, a contrast as stark as their worlds. "And what kind of man do you think I am, Solange?" She looks at him directly without blinking. "A lonely man." The words fall like stones into a deep well. Matthew feels a shiver run down his spine. This woman, this stranger in a cleaning uniform, has just named him more accurately than any corporate psychologist or occasional lover. "Loneliness is a choice in my case," he responds, trying to regain control. "I have too many responsibilities to distract myself with unnecessary connections." "Like your family?" she asks, now cleaning a glass award, recognizing Velarde Hospitals for excellence in financial management. The mention of family visibly tenses Matthew. His shoulders stiffen under the impeccable suit. His jaw tightens. "My family is not a topic of conversation," he states, with a tone that would have silenced any of his executives. But Solange is not a frightened executive. She's a woman who has watched life slip through her fingers helplessly. A woman who has nothing left to lose. "Excuse me, Mr. Velarde, I was just trying to get to know you better, as you wanted to get to know me." The soft but lethal irony in her voice disconcerts Matthew. He moves away, returning to the safety of his desk. He sits down and observes this strange woman, who cleans his trophies while dismantling his defenses with surgical precision. "You're right," he finally admits. "Perhaps the rules of this game should apply to both of us." Solange puts down the cloth and looks at him. "I'm not playing. Mr. Velarde, I never play with people who have the power to destroy lives with a signature." The comment seems strangely specific, but Matthew attributes it to employees' natural distrust of management. He cannot imagine that this woman knows what he signs every day, the decisions he makes, the protocols he approves or cancels. The intercom rings. Robert's voice interrupts the moment. "Mr. Velarde, I apologize for the interruption. Is everything in order with the previous situation?" Matthew presses the button to answer. "Everything's under control." "Robert, Miss Gutierrez is leaving now." Solange begins to gather her cleaning tools, understanding the hint. "I still have 35 minutes. Mr. Velarde," she says calmly. "You'll use them tomorrow," he replies, surprising her. "I'll expect you here, same place, same time. We'll continue our conversation. It's not a request. It's another order. But this time it comes with something more, a kind of expectation that is even more unsettling." "What if I don't come?" she challenges. Matthew smiles, and for the first time, the gesture seems almost genuine. "You'll come." Solange pushes her cart towards the door, but before leaving, she stops and turns. "You know, Mr. Velarde, you remind me of someone." Who? He asks, intrigued. My mother, when she cried locked in the bathroom, thinking no one could see her. And with those words, she leaves the office, leaving Matthew Velarde completely paralyzed, with an unsettling feeling of having been emotionally stripped bare for the first time in decades. No one, absolutely no one, had ever spoken to him like that before. No one had seen through his armor with such precision. The sun has not yet risen when Solange returns to the small apartment she shares with her cousin Zinnia in the Queen's Borough. Night public transport is scarce, forcing her to take a shared taxi that consumes a significant portion of her salary. But today, for some reason, she doesn't care. Her mind is occupied with the strange conversation with Matthew Velarde. The apartment, located on the third floor of a concrete building without an elevator, consists of 2 bedrooms, a small kitchenette and a tiny bathroom. She shares it with Zinnia, who works as a nurse at a community clinic, and occasionally with Teresa, Zinnia's 11-year-old daughter, when she is not with her father. It is small but clean and tidy, reflecting the women who inhabit it. Solange, is that you? Asks Zinnia's sleepy voice from her bedroom. Yes, it's me. Go back to sleep, it's barely 6. Everything okay at work? You're home earlier. Solange stops in the hallway, considering what to answer. There's no way to explain what happened with Matthew Velarde without sounding like a badly written soap opera. Everything's fine. I finished earlier than expected. She heads to the small altar she has set up in a corner of the living room. The framed photograph of Madame Hope smiles next to marigolds and a half-consumed candle. Every day upon returning, Solange lights a new candle and mentally speaks with her mother. It's a ritual that keeps her anchored when everything else seems to fall apart. I ran into him, Mom, she murmurs, lighting the candle. The man who signed your sentence. The words come out like a confession, though there is no guilt in them, only a strange sense of destiny fulfilled. During Esperanza's last days in the hospital, when doctors announced that the experimental treatment would be cancelled, Solange swore to find the person responsible. Not for revenge, but for understanding. She needed to look into the eyes of the human being capable of reducing her mother's life to a figure on a balance sheet. And now she had. She had looked directly into Matthew Velarde's eyes and had seen... What exactly? Not the monster she expected. Something more complex, more broken. A man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, as if it were a self-imposed punishment. She showers quickly, letting the warm water wash away the night's fatigue. As she dries herself, she examines her body in the steamed mirror. At 26, Solange retains the firmness of youth, but she also bears marks that tell her story. The small scar above her left eyebrow, the result of a childhood accident in the Key West Sea. The calluses on her hands, testimony to years of washing, scrubbing, holding others. Her body is a map of her life, a territory she has fiercely protected from male invasions. Unlike many women she knows, Solange has never allowed a man to possess her completely. Not out of prudishness or fear, but out of a conscious decision to keep at least that part of herself intact. She has seen too many friends and relatives disappear under the yoke of men who confused love with ownership. She swore her story would be different. She dresses in worn jeans and a simple t-shirt and heads to the kitchen to make coffee. The aroma fully awakens Zinnia, who appears yawning, wrapped in a colorful robe. You seem off, Solange. Are you sure everything's okay? Zinnia, 5 years older than Solange, has that special gift of nurses, diagnosing personal problems with just a glance. I met someone, Solange finally admits, pouring 2 cups of black coffee. Zinnia's eyes light up with interest. A man? It's about time, cousin. Since you arrived from Florida, you've only lived to work and care for Aunt Hope, rest her soul. It's not what you think, Solange clarifies, sitting on one of the kitchen stools. It's complicated. The best ones always are. Zinnia smiles, taking a sip of her coffee. What's his name? Is he handsome? Rich? All 3? Solange fiddles with her cup, considering how to explain the inexplicable. His name is Matthew Velarde. Zinnia's cup stops halfway to her lips. Velarde? As in Velarde Hospitals? The empire where you work cleaning? Solange nods, the owner himself. Zinnia puts the cup down on the counter with a dry thud. Holy Mary, Solange. How? When? Why? It was last night. The assignment system accidentally sent me to his private office. And he was there. And we talked. He proposed a strange game. An hour to impress him. Xenia's expression hardens. Solange, you know what that means coming from a man like him. They have a reputation for playing with female employees. My friend Lucy works at Velarde Hospital in the Upper East Side, and the stories she tells about the executives. It's not what you think, Solange interrupts her. He doesn't want that from me. He wants to get to know me, to know my story. That's even more dangerous, Xenia warns. Men like Velarde don't look for stories, they look for possessions. And when they get tired, they discard them. Solange remains silent, remembering the expression in Matthew's eyes when she mentioned her mother crying in the bathroom. It wasn't indignation she saw, but recognition, as if she had named a familiar pain. There's something else, she finally says. He's the one who signed the cancellation of Mom's treatment. Xenia pales. What? Are you sure? Ursing completely. I saw the document, Xenia. His name at the bottom with that elegant signature that looked like a mockery. Monsieur Velarde, Executive Director. My God, Solange, what are you planning to do? Xenia's voice is tinged with worry. Please tell me you're not thinking of anything crazy. Solange shakes her head, her eyes fixed on the cooling coffee. I just want to understand. To see the face behind the decision. To understand how someone can reduce human life to numbers on a spreadsheet. And then what? What do you gain from that? It's a good question. One Solange has asked herself all night. What does she hope to gain from these encounters with Matthew Velarde? It's not money, nor revenge, nor even justice. Perhaps it's something more basic, more primitive, recognition. For someone to recognize that Hope Gutierrez was more than a lost cause, more than an unnecessary expense. That she was a woman who embroidered dreams into fabric and sang while cooking mole negro at village festivals. I don't know, she finally admits, but I'm going back tonight. Solange. I'll be fine, Xenia, I'm not a child. And he's not exactly what I expected. What do you mean? Solange searches for the right words to describe the strange combination of power and fragility she perceived in Matthew Velarde. It's as if he's trapped in a prison he built himself. And for some reason, I have a key I didn't even know I possessed. Xenia sighs, recognizing the determination in her cousin's eyes. Just promise me you'll be careful. Powerful men are the most dangerous, because they're used to getting everything they want. I know, but this man doesn't know what he truly wants, and that makes him interesting. The rest of the day passes normally. Solange sleeps a few hours, then helps Xenia with household chores. In the afternoon, she picks Teresa up from school and helps her with her math homework. Everyday activities that somehow today seem to belong to another life, as if the night before had drawn an invisible line between before and after. At 9 in the evening, she prepares to return to work. Instead of the minimal makeup she usually wears, today she takes time to line her eyes. It's not vanity, it's armor. She ties her hair in a more elaborate braid than usual. It's not coquetry, it's strategy. And instead of the cheap perfume she buys at the local market, today she uses the last drops of the vanilla perfume that belonged to her mother. It's not seduction, it's a connection to her inner strength. You look different, Xenia observes from the sofa, where she's reviewing medical charts. I feel different, Solange admits. Be careful, cousin. Don't get lost in this game, whatever it is. Solange smiles with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. Don't worry. If anyone's going to get lost in this game, it won't be me. The commute to work seems shorter than ever. On the subway, she observes the people returning home after long days. Office workers with tired expressions, students with heavy backpacks, construction workers with rough hands. All of them live in a different America than Matthew Velarde's, an America where every dollar counts and dreams are postponed out of necessity. Upon arriving at the Velarde complex, the routine is the same. Clock in, pick up a clean uniform, prepare the cart with products. But something has changed in the attitude of the security personnel. Robert, the head, observes her with poorly disguised curiosity. The guards greet her by name, something they had never done before. Ms. Gutierrez, Robert addresses her as she heads to the elevator. Mr. Velarde left specific instructions for you. He hands her a white envelope with the company logo. Inside, a card with Matthew's elegant signature and a code. Full access to the 49th floor, 0.00 hours. Do you know why Mr. Velarde would want me to go to his office? Solange asks, feigning confusion. Robert avoids her gaze. It's not my place to question Mr. Velarde's orders, miss. only to carry them out. Of course, Solange thinks. No one questions the king in his castle. The first hours of her shift pass normally. She cleans empty offices on the lower floors, gleaming bathrooms that will be soiled again tomorrow, conference rooms where decisions affecting thousands are made. All the while, the weight of the card in her pocket reminds her of what's to come. As midnight approaches, her heart beats faster. At 11:55 p.m., she takes the executive elevator to the 49th floor. Unlike last night, today the doors open without a hitch, recognizing the access code. The hallway is dimly lit, creating shadows that dance on the Italian marble walls. At the end, the smoked glass door with the silver logo, Matthew Velarde's office. She takes a deep breath and pushes the door open. Matthew stands by the window, contemplating the city. He doesn't turn when she enters, but he knows she has noticed her presence. He wears a different suit than yesterday, dark grey instead of black, but just as impeccable. The moonlight reflects on his salt and pepper hair, giving him an almost supernatural appearance. "Punctual," he finally says, without turning. "I like punctuality." "I don't like to waste time," Solange replies, leaving her cart by the entrance. "Neither mine nor anyone else's." Now he turns. He observes her carefully, noticing the small changes in her appearance, the eyeliner, the more elaborate braid, the subtle vanilla scent that has replaced yesterday's industrial smell. "You look different." "You too, Matthew." "Matthew," he corrects. "If we're going to continue our game, at least let's call each other by our first names." "This isn't a game for me," she replies, holding his gaze. "But I'll call you Matthew if that makes the conversation easier." He nods, pleased, and points to a low table next to the white sofa. On it is a tray with 2 steaming cups and a plate of traditional sweet pastries, vanilla shells, elephant ears, and sugar wafers. "I thought we could share something more civilized than cleaning products tonight," he says with a hint of a smile. Solange observes the scene with distrust. This seemingly kind gesture, this attempt at normalcy, seems out of place in the sanctuary of power that is Matthew Velarde's office. "Hot chocolate and sweet pastries?" she asks, recognizing the unmistakable aroma. "Is this how you usually entertain your midnight guests?" "I don't have midnight guests," he replies seriously. "Only midnight decisions." The answer, as honest as it is unsettling, momentarily disarms Solange. She slowly approaches the table and sits on the sofa, tacitly accepting the invitation. Matthew sits opposite her, not on the sofa, but in a black leather armchair that seems designed to maintain distance. The contrast does not go unnoticed by Solange. She on the immaculate white sofa, he in the black armchair like opposing pieces on a chessboard. "So, where did we leave off yesterday?" he asks, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. "That you reminded me of my mother crying in the bathroom," Solange replies without hesitation. Her frankness makes her smile internally. Any other employee would have avoided repeating those words, fearing retaliation. But she has already experienced the worst possible retaliation, watching her mother fade away helplessly. Matthew nods slowly, as if reprocessing the impact of that observation. It's an interesting comparison. "What made you make it?" Solange holds the cup of hot chocolate in her hands, allowing the warmth to transfer to her fingers. The aroma is rich, authentic, not like the instant versions she usually drinks. "Your eyes. The way you looked at the city when I came in. As if you were seeing something no one else could see. My mother had that same look after crying. A kind of painful resignation." Matthew visibly tenses, as if she had touched a too sensitive nerve. He puts the cup down on the table and crosses his legs, regaining his controlled posture. "We don't know each other, Solange. You know nothing about me." "I know pain when I see it," she replies, tasting the chocolate. "It's exquisite, probably prepared by a private chef. I've had enough practice. Pain is subjective. What is suffering to you, to me, might simply be contemplation." Solange smiles for the first time, a brief but genuine gesture. "Do you always try to redefine reality to suit your comfort, Matthew?" The question, direct as an arrow, penetrates Matthew's defenses. For an instant, he seems genuinely surprised, as if no one had dared to question him that way in a long time. Then he regains his composure, the mask returning to its place. Reality is malleable, especially in business. What seems like a cruel decision today can save 100 lives tomorrow. The end justifies the means. And who decides what the right end is? Solange asks, taking a vanilla shell from the plate. You? Someone has to, he replies with a practiced certainty. Someone has to take responsibility for the difficult decisions. Solange carefully breaks the bread, watching it crumble between her fingers. Such fragility, she thinks, like life itself. My mother used to say that the most important decisions are not made with the head, but with the heart, she says, remembering Madame Hope's melodious voice. That when the mind and heart are in conflict, the heart is usually right. Your mother didn't run a multi-billion-dollar medical conglomerate, Matthew retorts. In my world, the heart is a luxury I cannot afford. Can't you or won't you? The question hangs between them, laden with implications. Matthew abruptly stands up and walks to an elegant cabinet in the corner of the office. He takes out a folder and returns with it. Solange Gutierrez, he reads from the document. 26 years old, born in Key West, Florida. Only child of Hope Gutierrez, seamstress. No registered father. Education up to high school. Did not complete university due to economic reasons. Arrived in New York City 3 years ago, coinciding with her mother's cancer diagnosis. Previous jobs: receptionist at a boutique hotel, cashier at a supermarket, assistant at a dry cleaner. No criminal record. No significant romantic relationships registered. Hired by Velarde Services 3 weeks ago. He closes the folder and places it on the table, between the hot chocolate cups. Your life summarized on one page. Solange feels a mixture of indignation and sadness, not because of the invasion of her privacy. She expected something like that, but because of the poverty of that description. How can a few lines capture the sunsets of Key West, the taste of the mole her mother prepared, the night studying by candlelight when there was no electricity, the dreams of becoming a teacher she abandoned to care for Hope? That's not my life, she replies calmly. It's what your system can track of it. They are two very different things. Matthew observes her with genuine curiosity. What's missing, then? Everything important, she says, putting down her empty cup. It's missing that at 8 years old I saved a stray dog who now lives with my Aunt Rufina. It's missing that I speak Zapotec because my grandfather refused to communicate in Spanish. It's missing that my dream was to be a primary school teacher and that I dropped out of university 1 semester short when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. It's missing that I've never slept with a man because I saw too many friends disappear under the shadow of those who claimed to love them. Solange's brutal honesty creates a dense silence in the room. Matthew remains still, as if each word were an unexpected revelation. Why are you telling me this? He finally asks. Because I wanted to impress you, didn't I? She replies with a touch of irony. To show you there's more to me than what that paper says. Matthew nods slowly, recognizing something in her that he seems to value. You have succeeded. And what do I gain from it? Solange asks, aside from keeping a job cleaning floors that others dirty. What do you want to gain? The question seems simple, but Solange knows it isn't. What does she really want from this man? Revenge for her mother? Justice, compensation, or something more complex that she herself doesn't yet understand? Answers, she finally says. I want to understand how a mind capable of reducing human suffering to numbers on a spreadsheet works. How someone can sleep after deciding that a life is worth less than a percentage on a quarterly balance sheet. The accusation is clear, though veiled. For a moment, Matthew seems disconcerted, as if trying to connect the dots of an invisible equation. Then his face hardens. I speak with honesty, Solange. Every day I make decisions that affect thousands of people. Some save lives, others condemn them. It's the nature of running a hospital network in a country with limited resources. I cannot afford the luxury of individual empathy. I must think of the entire system. And does that help you sleep at night? She asks with a mix of curiosity and reproach. I don't sleep, he replies with unexpected frankness. Not really. Not since a long time ago. Something in his tone, in the way his voice slightly cracks at the end, reveals a crack in Matthew Velarde's perfect facade. Solange perceives that there is a story behind it, a pain that he keeps buried under layers of control and discipline. What happened, Matthew? She asks, softening her tone. What turned you into this? He stands up again, this time walking to the window. New York City stretches before them, an ocean of lights flickering like fallen stars. When he speaks, his voice is barely audible. Have you ever wished you could erase a single moment from your life, an instant that changed everything? The question resonates within Solange like a bell. She thinks of the day the doctor gave them the diagnosis, how the world stopped and then continued but differently, broken. Yes, she replies sincerely. Many times. Matthew nods as if he had confirmed something important. I was 16, he begins, not looking at her. My younger brother, Edward, was 8. We were at the family estate in Lake Tahoe, by the lake. My parents had gone out to dinner with friends. I was in charge. He pauses, taking a deep breath. Solange can see his shoulders tense under the impeccable suit. Eddie, that's what we called him, always wanted to impress me. He would do anything to earn my approval. That day I challenged him to hold his breath underwater. A stupid sibling game. I told him if he could hold it for a full minute, he'd be as strong as me. His voice cracks slightly. Solange holds her breath, sensing what's coming. When I pulled him out, he wasn't the same. Doctors managed to resuscitate him, but the brain damage was extensive. He never fully regained consciousness. He lives, if you can call it living, in a special clinic in Palm Springs, California, connected to machines existing but not living, because of me. The confession fills the space between them, heavy as lead, transparent as glass. Solange then understands the root of Matthew's behavior. It's not just arrogance or calculated coldness. It's guilt, a guilt so profound that it has shaped his entire subsequent existence. I'm so sorry, she says sincerely. Matthew turns to look at her, his eyes reflecting a vulnerability that contradicts his always controlled posture. I don't want your pity, he responds, though without hostility. I just wanted you to understand that sometimes the most terrible decisions are born from the most broken places. Solange stands up and walks towards him, reducing the physical distance they have carefully maintained until now. Is that why you built all this? She asks, gesturing to the building, the empire. To compensate? To control, he corrects. After the accident, I swore I would never again allow chaos to determine the fate of anyone under my care. That every decision, however painful, would be based on data, on probabilities, on science, not on volatile emotions. But in doing so, haven't you lost something essential? Solange insists. Compassion isn't a weakness, Matthew. In my position, individual compassion is a luxury I sacrifice for the greater good, he replies, as if reciting a mantra. He repeats to himself. A hospital cannot function based on feelings. Solange shakes her head, remembering the last few weeks with her mother at Velarde Hospital in Greenwich Village. How the nurses, despite the system, found moments to show humanity. A hand held longer than necessary, a story shared during a serum change, a special hairstyle on particularly difficult days. You're wrong, she says firmly. A hospital without compassion is just a building with expensive equipment. It's the people, with their humanity intact, who truly heal. Matthew observes her with a mixture of fascination and bewilderment, as if listening to a familiar but forgotten language. For a moment he seems about to yield, to allow that truth to penetrate his carefully constructed defenses. Then the intercom rings, breaking the spell. Mr. Velarde, I apologize for the interruption. Robert's voice sounds tense. There's a situation at Velarde South Hospital that requires your immediate attention. Matthew presses the button to answer. What's happening? I'd prefer to inform you privately, sir. Formality instantly returns to Matthew's posture, like armor placed over momentary vulnerability. I'll be there in a moment, he replies, and then turns to Solange. We'll have to continue this conversation another time. She nods, understanding that the moment is broken. The man who for an instant shared his deepest pain has returned to being the impenetrable executive. I suppose my hour is up, she comments, checking her watch. 1 hour and 17 minutes. To be exact, he replies, regaining his professional tone. But who's counting? I am, Solange says, heading towards her cleaning cart. Time is the only thing we can't get back, isn't it? Matthew observes her, a flash of recognition in his gaze. Come back tomorrow, he says, and this time it's not an order but something closer to a request. There's more I want to tell you. Solange hesitates for a moment. She is wading into deep waters, establishing a connection with a man whose decisions irrevocably affected her life. A man who, despite his apparent power, seems as lost as she is in some respects. Why me, Matthew? She asks, a doubt that has been present from the beginning. Why share this with me? I'm just the person who cleans your floors. He seems to consider the question seriously, searching for an answer he himself doesn't fully comprehend. Because you looked at me as if you could see me, he finally says. Not the president of Velarde Hospitals, not the billionaire, not the man on the covers of business magazines, me, and that's unsettling. The honesty of the answer surprises her. She expected a more calculated, perhaps even manipulative explanation, but this sounds like naked truth. I'll come tomorrow, she concedes, but not because you order me to. Why then? Solange pushes her cart towards the door, but before leaving she turns to look at him. Because I also want to see if there's something more behind those sad eyes, something worth saving. And with those words she leaves the office, leaving Matthew Velarde alone with his thoughts again, but perhaps a little less alone than before. The midday sun filters its rays through the windows of Velarde South Hospital, creating geometric patterns on the marble floor of the main lobby. Matthew walks with a firm stride, flanked by Robert and Danielle Mondragon, the executive vice president and occasional lover. Employees step aside as he passes, lowering their gaze as if before royalty. It's an effect Matthew has cultivated for years, the reverential fear his presence inspires. The media is already speculating, Danielle informs him. A 40-year-old woman with perfectly styled short hair and a tailored suit that emphasizes her athletic figure. We need to issue a statement as soon as possible. We won't say anything until we have all the facts, Matthew replies, heading towards the administrative wing. The situation that required his immediate attention turned out to be a serious medical error. A patient received incorrect medication, causing a severe allergic reaction. He will survive, but the incident could lead to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit and, worse still from Matthew's perspective, damage Velarde Hospital's reputation for excellence. We already have the culprit, Robert interjects. Dr. Ramirez, a second-year resident. He admitted to having worked 36 consecutive hours due to understaffing. Matthew clenches his jaw. It's exactly the kind of chaos he detests, the kind of human variable his systems should prevent. Prepare his termination letter immediately, he orders, and make sure he signs a confidentiality agreement before leaving the building. Danielle nods, taking notes on her tablet. Do you want us to prepare some kind of compensation for the patient's family? She asks. We could offer indefinite free treatment, perhaps even a sum. Discuss it with legal, Matthew interrupts her. I want to minimize damage to our image, but without admitting corporate responsibility. They enter a boardroom where the hospital's management team awaits them. The atmosphere is tense. Everyone knows they are before the judge, jury, and executioner of their careers. Matthew takes a seat at the head of the table and listens to the details of the incident, the explanations, the apologies. His face remains impassive, but his mind is surprisingly divided. One part of him meticulously analyzes the situation, calculating costs, risks, mitigation strategies. This is the Matthew Velarde everyone knows, cold, analytical, ruthless. But another part, one that has been dormant for years, listens to the story of the exhausted resident and thinks of Solange's words, "A hospital without compassion is just a building with expensive equipment." The system failed, he finally says, interrupting the medical director, who is trying to explain how the error went unnoticed. Not just Dr. Ramirez. The room falls silent, everyone too surprised by this unexpected turn to respond immediately. Sir, with all due respect, the medical director dares to intervene. The protocol is clear. Ramirez should have checked the medication 3 times before. Ramirez should not have been working 36 hours straight, Matthew cuts him off. Why did we have a doctor in that state, making decisions about our patients' lives? No one responds. Everyone knows the answer: to save costs. Velarde Hospital's policy, implemented by Matthew himself years ago, prioritizes operational efficiency above all else. Less staff, more hours, higher performance. I want a complete review of our medical shifts, Matthew orders, and Dr. Ramirez will not be fired. He will be suspended with pay while we conduct the investigation. If we determine that the system failed, he will be reinstated with a formal apology. Faces around the table reflect astonishment. This is not the Matthew Velarde they know. Danielle observes him with particular intensity, as if trying to detect some sign of illness or temporary madness. Matthew, she says softly, using his first name. a privilege few have. Are you sure? This directly contradicts our zero-tolerance policies. Policies change, he replies, standing up. I want a full report on my desk first thing tomorrow, and prepare a press conference. I will personally take responsibility for the systemic deficiencies that allowed this error. As he leaves the room, leaving behind a chorus of confused murmurs, Matthew surprises himself. He hasn't planned these decisions. They have arisen almost instinctively, as if a long-silenced voice within him had suddenly awakened. The voice sounds strangely like Solange Gutierrez. On the way back to the corporate tower, Danielle insists on accompanying him in the private car. As soon as the doors close, she drops her professional mask. "What on earth was that, Matthew?" she asks, genuinely concerned. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly fine," he replies, looking out the tinted window at the rapidly passing buildings. "I'm just reconsidering some things." "Reconsidering?" she repeats, incredulous. "You never reconsider. You decide and the world adapts. It's what made you who you are." Matthew remains silent. Who is he, really? For so long he has defined himself by his empire, by his business decisions, by the absolute control he exerts over everything around him. But Solange's words have opened a crack in that carefully constructed identity. "Because you looked at me as if you could see me." "People change, Danielle," he finally says. She laughs, a brief, sharp sound. "Not you. Not Matthew Velarde, the man who turned family tragedy into a medical empire. The man who makes the difficult decisions no one else dares to make." There is a strange mix of admiration and resentment in her voice. Danielle has been by his side for 10 years, rising through the corporate hierarchy thanks to her fierce intelligence and unquestioning loyalty. But Matthew knows she has also paid a price. She sacrificed chances for family, meaningful relationships, perhaps even parts of her humanity, to keep up with his relentless pace. "Why do you never talk to me about your brother?" she asks, suddenly surprising him. 10 years, Matthew. 10 years together, professionally and occasionally personally, and you never mention Edward. The name falls like a stone in the silence of the car. Matthew visibly tenses. No one in the company mentions Edward. It's an unspoken taboo that everyone respects. "There's nothing to say," he replies dryly. "A lie," she insists. "You pay a fortune to keep him in that clinic in Palm Springs. You have a medical team dedicated exclusively to him, but you never visit him. You never talk about him. It's as if he exists only as a financial obligation, not as your brother." Enough, Danielle. And now suddenly you're talking about compassion and systemic responsibility. What changed, Matthew? Or perhaps I should ask, who? Danielle's intuition has always been sharp. It's part of what makes her so valuable as an executive, and so dangerous as a confidant. "You're imagining things," Matthew says, trying to close the topic. "Is it that new cleaning employee?" Danielle asks, confirming Matthew's fears. "Robert told me she's been visiting your office. Solange Gutierrez, if I'm not mistaken." Matthew curses inwardly. He should have anticipated that Robert would inform Danielle. The two have worked together for years, and she has ways of getting information that even he doesn't know. "She's an employee who showed potential for something more," he replies, with studied indifference. "I'm considering reassigning her." "Please, Matthew." Danielle rolls her eyes. "I know that look. I've seen it before when you find something, or someone, that piques your curiosity. But usually they're corporate acquisitions, not cleaning girls." The car stops in front of the Velarde Tower. Matthew waits for the chauffeur to open the door, eager to escape this conversation. "There's nothing more to say on this matter," he states as he exits the vehicle. "I have work to do." Danielle follows him, unperturbed. "Just be careful," she warns. "Curiosity can be dangerous when directed at the wrong people. And this girl, there's something about her file that doesn't quite add up." Matthew stops dead in his tracks. "What are you talking about?" "Her mother," Danielle replies. "Hope Gutierrez. Oncology patient in Greenwich Village until 3 months ago. Part of the group whose experimental treatment was cancelled by... guess who?" The world seems to stop for an instant. Matthew vaguely remembers that memo. An expensive treatment with low chances of success, patients with terminal prognoses, limited resources that could save more lives if reallocated. A purely rational decision based on data and probabilities. Like hundreds of similar decisions he has made over the years, but now that decision has a face. Solange's face. Are you sure? He asks, though he already knows the answer. Danielle nods, her eyes carefully assessing Matthew's reaction. Completely. I checked the records personally when I found out about your nocturnal meetings. This girl didn't just appear in your life by chance, Matthew. The implications fall on him like an avalanche. Solange's questions about compassion, about reducing lives to numbers, about decisions based on spreadsheets. They weren't philosophical reflections. They were veiled accusations. She knows exactly who he is and what he did. Thank you for the information, he finally says, regaining his composure. I'll handle the matter. Daniela observes him with a mixture of concern and something that could be jealousy. Be careful, Matthew, she repeats. You wouldn't be the first person to try to manipulate you to get something. Though I must admit her approach is original. Most use sex or money, not this. Matthew nods distractedly and heads towards the private elevators. He needs to be alone to process this revelation. As the doors close, he sees Danielle watching him with a calculating expression. He knows she's not done with this topic, that she'll continue investigating Solange, looking for weaknesses, potential threats. In the solitude of the elevator, Matthew tries to organize his thoughts. Was it all an elaborate revenge? Every word, every glance, every moment of apparent sincerity, just part of a plan to… what exactly? Make him feel guilty? Expose him somehow? Get some kind of compensation? But something doesn't fit that theory. He remembers Solange's eyes when he spoke about Edward, the way she listened without judgment, how she saw beyond his mask of power. That cannot be faked, can it? Upon arriving at his office, the first thing he notices is that everything is immaculately clean. The windows sparkle, the surfaces gleam, even the air seems fresher. Solange has been here, performing the work she was actually hired for. This detail, as mundane as it is revealing, disconcerts him even more. If her goal was to manipulate him, why bother to fulfill her cleaning duties with such dedication? He goes to his desk and finds something that wasn't there before. A small wildflower, probably picked from the corporate gardens, placed on a folded tissue. Opening it, he finds a handwritten message. The hardest decisions are the ones we make alone, but we don't have to be alone to make them. Yes. Matthew slowly sits down, holding the improvised message between his fingers. The simplicity of the gesture, the depth of the words, contradict the image of a calculating avenger that Danielle tried to plant in his mind. This seems too genuine, or perhaps that is precisely the trap. Perhaps Solange Gutierrez is more astute than anyone anticipated. Perhaps she has found the only weakness in Matthew Velarde's armor, his secret, never admitted longing to be truly seen by someone. To be more than the man who makes difficult decisions. The intercom rings, pulling him from his thoughts. Mr. Velarde, you have a video conference with the Singapore investors in 5 minutes, his assistant announces. Matthew carefully places the flower and note in the top drawer of his desk. Thank you, Patricia. I'll be ready. As he prepares the documents for the meeting, a question persists in his mind. Will Solange come tonight? And if she comes, what will he do with this new information? The answer, he realizes, will determine much more than the future of a cleaning employee. It could determine the kind of man he will become from now on. The small apartment in Queens feels more suffocating than usual this afternoon. Solange rummages through the old cedar chest that belonged to her mother, searching among physical and emotional memories. The box contains all the life they managed to bring from Key West. Faded photographs, important documents, Madame Hope's most cherished embroideries, and something Solange had never noticed before, a packet of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. What are you doing, cousin? Xenia asks, entering the room with a cup of peppermint tea. You've been in there for hours. Solange looks up, her fingers caressing the packet of letters. I found something. Mom's letters. To whom? I don't know. They're addressed to someone named M. Solange's heart pounds. Could it be a coincidence? Or did her mother know Matthew Velarde beyond the cold doctor-patient relationship she imagined? With trembling hands, she unties the ribbon and opens the first letter. Esperanza's elegant handwriting fills the page, words written in blue ink on cheap but carefully preserved paper. Dear M, today marks 3 weeks since your last visit. The nurses say you're busy, that the hospital needs you. I understand. Life goes on for those who can live it fully. I write to you even though I know I will never send these letters. They are more like conversations I have with you in my mind, when the nights are long and the pain is too intense. Yesterday, Solange read me that Neruda poem I love so much. She has your same passion for literature, though she doesn't know it. At times, when she talks about her dreams of being a teacher, I see in her the same light that shone in your eyes when you read Borges to me on those visiting afternoons. Before the weight of the world extinguished it, I wonder if you will ever meet her. If you will see in her what I see, an unbreakable spirit. So different from yours now, but perhaps similar to the one you had before life hardened you. Always yours in these pages. Hope. Solange looks up, confused and moved in equal measure. She reads another letter dated a month later. My dearest M. Today I saw you on the news. They announced the expansion of Velarde hospitals, your serious face before the cameras, so different from the shy smile you showed me when I told you stories of Key West. I wonder if that man in the impeccable suit remembers the afternoons when you came as a volunteer, when you held my hand during the most difficult chemotherapies, when you told me with tears in your eyes about your brother's accident. The nurses say you no longer participate in the volunteer program, that now they only see you in administrative meetings, talking about budgets and efficiency. I refuse to believe that this is the same young man who promised me he would find a way to make hospitals less places of suffering and more spaces of human dignity. Perhaps one day you will remember that promise. Perhaps one day someone will remind you who you were before you became who they think you should be. With undiminished affection, Hope. Tears stream down Solange's cheeks. These letters reveal a connection she never imagined. Her mother knew Matthew Velarde years ago, when he still retained some humanity, before control and efficiency became his religion. Are you okay? Xenia asks, worried by her cousin's silence. Solange hands her the letters, unable to explain in words the revelation they contain. As Xenia reads, her expression changes from curiosity to astonishment. My God, Solange, do you think this M is… Matthew Velarde, Solange confirms. My mother knew him when he was young. It seems he volunteered at the hospital during her first diagnosis, and then he abandoned her? Xenia asks, indignant, only to later deny her the treatment that could have saved her. Solange shakes her head, trying to process this new information. I don't think it's that simple, Mom writes, as if she understood why he changed. As if she had seen that change happen and regretted it, but didn't blame him. She was always too understanding, Xenia murmurs. What are you going to do with this? It's a good question. The revelation changes everything and nothing at the same time. On the one hand, it confirms the intuitive connection she felt with Matthew from the very beginning, that inexplicable recognition that went beyond words. On the other hand, it makes his subsequent betrayal even more painful. He wasn't just an executive making cold decisions. He was someone who knew Esperanza personally, who held her hand, who made her promises he later forgot. I'm going to confront him, Solange decides, gathering the letters. Tonight, be careful, cousin, Xenia warns. Powerful men are dangerous when they feel cornered. Solange places the most revealing letters in her purse. She doesn't plan to attack Matthew with them, but to understand, to see if anything remains of the young man who visited her mother, who read poetry and dreamed of more humane hospitals. I'm not going to corner him, she replies. I'm just going to hold a mirror up to him. What he sees and what he does with it will be up to him. As she prepares for her shift, Solange feels a strange calm. The pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. Matthew's inexplicable interest in her, the sense of familiarity, even his reluctance to talk about Edward. They weren't coincidences, but threads of a larger tapestry that fate had been weaving for years. This time, upon arriving at the Velarde building, she notices something different. The guards observe her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Robert, normally distant but professional, seems uncomfortable when he greets her. Something has changed in the corporate atmosphere, as if an invisible current were running through the halls. Miss Gutierrez, Robert addresses her as she heads to the locker rooms. I must inform you that your access privileges to the 49th floor have been temporarily suspended. Solange stops, surprised. By whose order? Danielle Mondragon's, Robert replies, avoiding her gaze. Executive Vice President. So that's it. Someone else has noticed the nocturnal encounters and decided to intervene. Solange nods, thanking him for the information, and heads to the locker rooms to change. Her mind works quickly, evaluating options. The access suspension is an obstacle, but not an absolute impediment. If Matthew really wants to see her, he'll find a way. She begins her shift like any other night, methodically cleaning lower floors, empty offices, conference rooms. But her mind is elsewhere, reviewing her mother's letters, trying to imagine a younger Matthew Velarde, less hardened by power and guilt. At 11:30 p.m., as she cleans the restrooms on the 43rd floor, her phone vibrates with a message from an unknown number. Service elevator B, 11:45 p.m. M. Her heart quickens. Despite Mondragon's intervention, Matthew is still seeking contact. This confirms that there's something deeper at play than simple curiosity or manipulation. At the appointed time, Solange discreetly heads to service elevator B, a less-traveled route connecting the operational areas to the executive floors. The doors open, revealing Robert, whose expression suggests he is acting against his better judgment. "Mr. Velarde requests your presence," he says formally. "Please accompany me." The elevator does not go up to the 49th floor as she expected, but descends to the underground parking garage. There, a black car with tinted windows waits with the engine running. Robert opens the rear door for her and Solange. After a moment of hesitation, gets in. Matthew Velarde waits inside, dressed more informally than in their previous encounters. Dark trousers and a white shirt without a tie, sleeves rolled up to the elbows revealing strong, tense forearms. His face, normally composed, shows signs of exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," he says as the car starts. "I apologize for the mystery, but it was necessary." "Ms. Mondragon?" Solange asks, guessing the reason. Matthew nods, a tense smile curving his lips. "Danielle can be protective of what she considers company assets, including me. And am I that? A threat to company assets?" The question hangs between them as the car navigates the night streets of New York City. Solange notices there's no chauffeur. Matthew is driving, something he clearly doesn't do often, judging by how he concentrates on the traffic. "Where are we going?" she asks, suddenly aware of the unusualness of the situation. "To a place where we can talk without being interrupted," he replies, turning onto Fifth Avenue. "A place that means something to me, and apparently to you too." The car drives along the emblematic avenue, passing the illuminated Statue of Liberty, until it takes the road towards Central Park. Finally, it stops in front of a building Solange recognizes immediately, the old Velarde Central Hospital, the first hospital in the chain, now mainly converted into administrative offices. "Why here?" she asks, though something inside her already knows the answer. "Because this is where I met her," Matthew replies, turning off the engine. "Your mother, Hope Gutierrez." The name floats between them like a tangible ghost. Solange holds her breath, waiting for Matthew to continue. "I was 20 years old," he says, looking at the building with a distant expression. "I was studying medicine and volunteered for the oncology patient support program. It was part of my redemption, I suppose." "Because of Edward?" "I know," Solange says softly. "She told me. In her own way." Matthew looks at her surprised. "She talked about me." Solange takes the letters from her purse and hands them to him in silence. Matthew takes them with hands that tremble slightly, recognizing immediately the handwriting on the envelope. "To M." "She never sent them," Solange explains. "I found them today among her things. I think she always knew you would never read them. They were more for her than for you." Matthew opens the first letter and begins to read. His face, normally so controlled, transforms with each line. Pain, nostalgia, shame, regret, emotions he has probably kept buried for years now flow freely. "I never knew she wrote these letters," he finally says, his voice hoarse. "I stopped visiting her when I graduated. Life got complicated. The company grew, responsibilities increased, and it became increasingly difficult to reconcile the executive I was becoming with the young man who read poetry to terminal patients." And then? Solange presses. What happened when she returned years later with terminal cancer? Matthew closes his eyes as if the memory were physically painful. "I didn't know," he admits. "Hospitals treat thousands of patients. I don't review every chart, only cases that represent significant financial decisions. Like canceling expensive experimental treatments for patients with low chances of survival," Solange completes. Without hostility, merely stating a fact. Yes, Matthew nods. When I approved that policy, it was just another memo. Names on a list, statistics, resources to reallocate to maximize overall positive impact. My mother wasn't a statistic, Solange says. She was a woman who wrote you letters she never sent, who believed that one day you would remember your humanity. The words hit Matthew hard. He looks at the letters in his hands as if they contained both poison and antidote. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? He asks. Why this game? It wasn't a game, Solange replies sincerely. At first I just wanted to see your face, to understand how someone could make decisions that affect human lives with such coldness. Then when we started talking, something changed. I saw the man behind, the executive, and I wondered if that man would know who I really am. Danielle thinks you're manipulating me, Matthew says, that this is an elaborate revenge. And what do you think? Matthew looks at her intently, his dark eyes trying to penetrate beyond appearances, searching for the truth in Solange's amber eyes. I think the universe has a strange sense of humor, he finally replies, or perhaps of poetic justice. All these letters I never read, all those promises I forgot. And now I'm here with you, Hope's daughter. Fate has strange ways, Solange concedes. I don't believe in fate, Matthew responds automatically. I believe in decisions and consequences. Then perhaps this is both, she suggests. The result of your decisions and my consequences, or vice versa. A thoughtful silence fills the car. Through the windshield, the old hospital rises against the New York City night sky, a silent witness to stories that intertwine beyond the understanding of their protagonists. What do you want from me, Solange? Matthew finally asks. Revenge? Justice? Compensation? I want you to remember, she replies simply. I want you to remember the man who held my mother's hand while reading Borges to her, the one who promised her hospitals where dignity mattered as much as efficiency. Matthew nods slowly, understanding what she is truly asking for. Not retribution, but redemption. Not for her, but for himself. I don't know if that man still exists, he admits with an honesty that surprises even himself. Too many years have passed, too many difficult decisions. I think he does, Solange says, daring to touch his hand for the first time. I've seen him in your eyes when you talk about Edward, when you confessed your guilt, when you gave that strange order today about Dr. Ramirez. Matthew looks at her, surprised. How do you know that? News travels fast in a hospital, she smiles. Especially when the feared Matthew Velarde does something completely out of character, like defending a doctor who made a mistake. For the first time in her presence, perhaps for the first time in years, Matthew laughs. It's a brief, almost rusty laugh, like a long, unused mechanism. I suppose it wasn't very subtle. It was human, Solange replies, and that's the only thing my mother would have wanted to see. Matthew looks at the letters again, then at Solange. The connection between them is so evident now, so undeniable, that he wonders how he didn't see it before. Perhaps because he spent decades training himself not to truly see people, to reduce them to variables in complex equations. I should take you back, he says, aware that the night is advancing. Danielle will have her spies looking for you all over the building. Are you afraid of her? Solange asks. No, Matthew replies, but she's right to be concerned. You are dangerous, Solange Gutierrez. Me? She smiles, genuinely amused. I'm just a cleaning employee. You are much more than that, Matthew says with sudden seriousness. You are the first person in years who has managed to make me question everything I've built, and that makes you the most dangerous person I have ever met. He starts the engine and the car silently returns towards the Velarde Tower, carrying two people whose lives have been intertwined long before they met, united by unsent letters and forgotten promises that now, perhaps, have a chance to be remembered. The following morning dawns with an unusually clear sky over New York City. From her office window, Danielle Mondragon watches the metropolis awaken while slowly sipping her Colombian coffee. Unlike Matthew, who rose to the top driven by guilt and control, Danielle ascended thanks to relentless ambition, and an exceptional ability to anticipate threats. And now all her instincts scream that Solange Gutierrez represents the greatest threat they have faced in years. On her glass desk rests a folder labeled Confidential. She opens it again, reviewing the information her private investigators compiled in record time. The complete medical history of Hope Gutierrez, including detailed notes of her participation in the volunteer program where she met Matthew. Photographs of Solange over the past 3 years, tracing her journey from Key West to New York City. Transcripts of conversations with former employers, neighbors, fellow students. Nothing incriminating, nothing to suggest an elaborate plan of revenge or manipulation. Just the story of a woman who abandoned her dreams to care for her sick mother and who now, by some twisted joke of fate, has entered Matthew Velarde's orbit. "Patricia, connect me with Robert," she orders through the intercom. Minutes later, the head of security enters her office, his normally stoic expression now tinged with discomfort. "You called for me, Ms. Mondragon?" "Sit down, Robert," Danielle instructs, closing the folder. "I want to know exactly what happened last night with Mr. Velarde and Ms. Gutierrez." Robert hesitates, clearly caught between two conflicting loyalties. "Following your instructions, I suspended Ms. Gutierrez's access to the 49th floor," he begins. "Later, Mr. Velarde personally asked me to escort her to the parking garage where he was waiting." "And then?" "They left in Mr. Velarde's personal car. They returned approximately 2 hours later. He accompanied her to the lobby and then retired to his residence." "Did you notice anything unusual in their behavior, in either of them?" Robert carefully considers the question. Mr. Velarde seemed different, less tense perhaps. "And Ms. Gutierrez?" He pauses. "She was crying, but they didn't seem like tears of sadness." Danielle nods, processing the information. She knows Matthew better than anyone, except perhaps his absent mother. She has seen him in his most ruthless moments and in his rare instances of vulnerability. She knows that beneath the facade of the relentless executive lies a man deeply scarred by guilt. And now she fears that Solange has found a crack in that carefully forged armor. "Thank you, Robert. You may go," she says, and as he reaches the door, she adds, "One more thing. From now on, I want daily reports on Ms. Gutierrez's movements within the facilities, and if Mr. Velarde tries to contact her again, I want to know immediately." Robert nods and leaves, leaving Danielle lost in thought. It's not just jealousy that motivates her vigilance, although there is certainly a personal element to her concern. It's something more fundamental, the protection of the Velarde empire. For 10 years she has dedicated her life to this conglomerate, sacrificing relationships, family opportunities, even parts of her humanity. She will not allow a cleaning lady with a tragic story to jeopardize it. She picks up her phone and dials a number she rarely uses. "I need an urgent meeting," she says when they answer. "It's about the future of Velarde hospitals." Meanwhile, in her apartment in Queens, Solange wakes up after barely 3 hours of restless sleep. The revelations of the previous night still swirl in her mind like disoriented birds. Her mother and Matthew, the unsent letters, the idealistic young man who became the ruthless executive who then signed Hope's medical sentence. And now, the undeniable connection she feels towards him, a connection that confuses and disturbs her in equal measure. "You look terrible," Zinnia comments, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "Rough night." Solange nods, too exhausted to explain the complexity of what happened. How to describe the moment Matthew read her mother's letters, how the mask of control crumbled, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. How to explain that for a brief instant, when their hands touched, she felt an electric current that had nothing to do with resentment or justice. "The letters," she finally says. "He read them." "And?" Zinnia asks, sitting opposite her at the small kitchen table. "And I think something awakened in him, something that had been dormant for a long time." Zinnia studies her cousin's face with professional concern, like the experienced nurse she is. "Solange, you worry me. You're talking as if this man deserves redemption, as if he's not the same one who denied your mother the treatment that could have given her more time." "It's complicated," Solange sighs. "I'm not justifying what he did. But after reading the letters, after hearing his story, there's more to him than I thought." "Be careful," Zinnia warns. Powerful men are experts at manipulating emotions, and you're vulnerable since Aunt Hope passed. Solange remains silent, considering her cousin's words. Is she truly seeing Matthew Velarde, or just projecting onto him her own needs for closure and understanding? Is this connection as real as she feels, or simply the echo of the relationship her mother had with him years ago? Her phone vibrates with a message. It's from Robert, the head of security. Your presence is required in HR at 10 a.m. Urgent matter. A shiver runs down her spine. Have they decided to fire her? Has that woman, Danielle Mondragon, intervened to eliminate what she perceives as a threat? I have to go, she says, getting up quickly. They're waiting for me in human resources. Problems? Zinnia asks, worried. I don't know, but I'll find out soon. The journey to the Velarde Tower seems endless. On the crowded subway, Solange mentally reviews her options if she gets fired. Her financial situation is precarious. The cleaning salary barely covers basic expenses, and the medical debts accumulated during her mother's illness. Without that income, she would have to leave the city, perhaps return to Key West, where at least she has relatives who could help her temporarily. But the idea of leaving. Now, when this strange story with Matthew Velarde is just beginning to unravel, is unbearable. Not out of romantic interest, she tells herself, but out of something deeper, the feeling that they are both caught in a narrative that needs resolution. Upon arriving at the Human Resources Department, she is greeted by a middle-aged woman with a kind but professional expression. Ms. Gutierrez, thank you for coming. I'm Lucy Mendoza, Director of Talent Development. Talent Development, Solange repeats, confused. She expected to meet someone from dismissals, not professional development. That's right, Lucy smiles. I understand you almost completed your degree in education, correct? Yes, I had one semester left when I had to drop out, Solange replies, increasingly bewildered. Excellent. You see, we are expanding our education program for long-term pediatric patients. We are looking for people with an education background and special sensitivity to complex medical situations. Your profile interests us. Solange blinks, trying to process what she's hearing. A job offer? In education? Excuse me, but I don't understand. I'm cleaning staff. How did my profile get to talent development? Lucy maintains her professional smile. The internal talent identification program periodically reviews the files of all collaborators. Yours caught the committee's attention. It's a reasonable explanation, but Solange instinctively knows it's not the full truth. There's only one person with the power to pull these strings so quickly. Does this have anything to do with Mr. Velarde? She asks directly. Lucy's smile falters for an instant. All important movements eventually pass through general management, she responds diplomatically. But I assure you that this offer is based exclusively on your merits and our organizational needs. Solange nods, deciding not to press further. She is handed a folder with the job description, working conditions, and a salary that triples her current income. It's an opportunity that would change her life, allowing her to resume some of the dreams she abandoned when her mother's illness worsened. I need time to consider it, she says, though a part of her has already decided. Of course, Lucy replies, you have until Friday to give us your answer. Upon leaving the Human Resources office, Solange instinctively heads towards the executive elevators. She doesn't have access to the 49th floor, but she feels the need to confront Matthew, to understand if this is genuine interest in her development or simply an elaborate form of compensation. Or worse, a way to keep her away from the area where she might continue to meet him. In the main lobby, she stops, surprised to see Matthew crossing towards the private elevators, accompanied by several executives. He wears an impeccable navy blue suit, his posture radiating characteristic authority, but there is something different about him. An almost imperceptible change in the way he holds his shoulders, as if an invisible weight had slightly diminished. Their gazes meet across the bustling lobby. For an instant, the world around them seems to vanish. Matthew stops, an inscrutable expression crossing his face. Recognition, guilt, something deeper? Next to him, Danielle Mondragon notices the silent exchange and follows Matthew's gaze to Solange. Her eyes narrow, assessing the threat, calculating strategies. The moment breaks when one of the executives claims Matthew's attention. He nods distractedly and continues on his way, but before entering the elevator, he looks back at Solange. An almost imperceptible gesture, a slight nod, as if confirming something only they understood. Solange takes a deep breath and heads to the locker rooms to start her regular cleaning shift, the folder with the job offer weighing in her purse like a promise. Or a trap. On the 49th floor, Matthew tries to concentrate on the budget meeting, but his mind constantly returns to Hope's letters and Solange's gaze in the lobby. He has spent the night awake, rereading the letters, remembering the young man he was, wondering when and how he allowed that idealist to disappear under layers of corporate pragmatism. "Matthew, are you with us?" Danielle's voice brings him back to the present. "Of course," he replies, straightening up. "Let's continue with the review of the Southern project." Danielle observes him with a mixture of professional concern and something more personal. 10 years of working together have created an intimacy that, while never fully romantic, goes far beyond strictly professional. She has been his confidant, his ally, his occasional escape from loneliness, and now she feels she is losing him before her eyes. The meeting continues, but the tension between them is palpable to everyone present. When it finally ends and the executives withdraw, Danielle closes the boardroom door and turns to Matthew. "What are you doing?" she asks without preamble. "What do you mean?" "You know perfectly well what I mean. The job offer for your cleaning lady, the changes in hospital policies, the press conference where you practically apologized for prioritizing efficiency over patient dignity." Matthew observes her, recognizing the genuine concern beneath the professional indignation. "I'm correcting mistakes," he replies simply. "Mistakes?" Danielle almost laughs. Those supposed mistakes built an empire. They made Velarde Hospitals a leader in the sector, a model of efficient management. And now suddenly all that is wrong? Not everything, Matthew concedes. But we lost something important along the way, Danielle. Something I promised never to forget. "And was that girl who reminded you?" Danielle asks, her voice mixing disbelief and pain. "A cleaning employee you barely know?" "It's not that simple," Matthew replies. "There's a history between us that even I didn't understand until last night." He then tells her about the letters, about his relationship with Hope years ago, about the terrible irony of having signed the cancellation of the treatment without knowing who she was. Danielle listens, her expression transforming from skepticism to concern. "Matthew, don't you see what's happening?" she finally says. "This isn't fate or karma or whatever you think. It's a tragic coincidence that this girl is using to manipulate you." "You don't know her," he replies, with a firmness that surprises both of them. "And you do?" "After 3 nocturnal conversations." "Sometimes we know someone better in 3 honest conversations than in 10 years of calculated interactions," Matthew says, and the comment falls between them like a veiled accusation. Danielle recoils as if slapped. For an instant her professional mask cracks, revealing the pain beneath. Then she recomposes herself, her expression hardening. "I've called an extraordinary board meeting for tomorrow," she announces. "Your recent decisions have caused concern among shareholders." "Without consulting me?" Matthew asks, though without true surprise. "Precisely because I knew you would object," she replies. "Matthew, I'm trying to protect you. From yourself, from her, from the consequences of this. Whatever is happening with you. I don't need protection, Danielle. I need to remember who I was before all this became the only important thing." They stare at each other, 2 people who have shared so much, but who now seem separated by a growing chasm. "I will not allow you to destroy everything we have built," Danielle finally says, heading for the door. "What we have built?" Matthew repeats. "Or what I built on the ruins of my conscience." Danielle stops, her hand on the doorknob. "You are a great man, Matthew Velarde. The most brilliant I have ever known. But right now you are blinded by a guilt that is not yours to bear, and by a woman who represents everything you have refused to be. And my duty, as vice president of this company and as the person who knows you best in this world, is to prevent you from making the biggest mistake of your life." She leaves without waiting for an answer, leaving Matthew alone with his thoughts, with Hope's letters that he now keeps in the inner pocket of his jacket, with the image of Solange in the lobby looking at him as no one has looked at him in years, without fear, without calculated admiration, without Edward's shadow between them. Only with the silent recognition of 2 souls who, by some strange design, have been intertwined in a story that both need to end to be able to start anew. The boardroom on the 50th floor is silent as the members of the board of directors wait. It's an imposing space, designed to intimidate. A solid mahogany oval table, Italian leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of New York City. On the walls, oil portraits of the founders of Velarde Hospitals, Matthew's father, Mr. Henry, with his stern gaze, his uncles, initial partners who sold their shares years ago, and an empty space where Matthew's own portrait should be, a space he has refused to fill, as if doubting he deserved his place in that family gallery. Danielle Mondragon occupies her seat to the right of the head of the table, reviewing documents and occasionally consulting her tablet. Her face does not reveal the inner turbulence, the conflict between her professional loyalty to the company and her complex personal relationship with Matthew. She has spent the night preparing her case, collecting data to demonstrate how Matthew's recent decisions threaten the conglomerate's financial stability. The door opens, and everyone instinctively stands up. But it is not Matthew who enters, but Robert, the head of security, whose presence at a board meeting is unusual. Mr. Velarde requests that the meeting be moved to Velarde Hospital in Palm Springs, California, he announces. Vehicles are prepared in the parking garage. Murmurs of confusion fill the room. Danielle frowns. Palm Springs? Why? Mr. Velarde has indicated that everything will become clear upon arrival, Robert replies, avoiding her gaze. He has also requested the presence of Ms. Solange Gutierrez. The revelation drops like a bomb in the room. The board members exchange perplexed glances. A cleaning employee at a board meeting? It's unheard of. This is unacceptable, Danielle declares, standing up. The board cannot be manipulated in this manner. With all due respect, Ms. Mondragon, interjects Mr. Javier Morales, the oldest and most respected board member, Mr. Velarde is still the president and majority shareholder. If he wishes to change the location of a meeting, it is his prerogative. Danielle suppresses her frustration. She had counted on the board's indignation at Matthew's recent extravagances, but it's clear that their respect for him remains intact, at least for now. Very well, she concedes. Let's go to Palm Springs. The convoy of executive vehicles drives along the highway connecting New York City to Palm Springs, California, the city of eternal spring. In one of them, Solange contemplates the mountainous landscape with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Robert's call surprised her in the middle of her shift, with no explanation beyond, Mr. Velarde requires your presence. What does Matthew intend with this audacious move? And why Palm Springs specifically? Next to her, Robert maintains a professional silence, but Solange perceives his unease. He is caught in a power game whose rules he doesn't know, forced to follow orders that probably contradict Danielle Mondragon's. May I ask you something, Mr. Calder? Solange says, breaking the silence. Robert nods cautiously. How long have you been working with Mr. Velarde? 15 years, he replies after a pause. Since Velarde Hospital in the Upper East Side opened its doors. Then you've seen his entire transformation. It's not a question, but an affirmation. Robert studies her with renewed curiosity. Yes, Ms. Gutierrez, I've seen him build an empire, and what that has cost him personally. Was he always like this? Solange asks. So, controlled? Robert carefully considers his answer, as if fearing to violate some implicit confidentiality. No, he finally says. There was a time in the beginning when he still personally visited certain patients, when he stopped to talk to staff at all levels, when he smiled for no apparent reason. What changed? Success, Robert replies simply. Or rather, the price of success. Every new hospital, every new acquisition, every new efficiency policy. It was like watching someone build a fortress around himself, brick by brick. Solange nods, finding in these words confirmation of what she has intuited from the beginning. Matthew Velarde is not a monster by nature, but a man who has become something he both fears and needs in equal measure. And now something is changing again, she ventures. Robert looks at her directly for the first time. You are changing something in him. Ms. Gutierrez, I don't know how or why, but I see it, and others see it too. Like Ms. Mondragon, Solange completes, especially her, Robert confirms. She has been more than his right hand for a long time. The implication is clear, and Solange feels an unexpected pang. It's not jealousy, she tells herself. It's rather the understanding that this story is even more complex than she imagined, with more people whose lives and hearts are at stake. The convoy finally arrives at its destination, a modern and elegant structure on the outskirts of Palm Springs. It doesn't look like a traditional hospital, but rather a luxurious rehabilitation center with extensive gardens and architecture that harmoniously integrates with the natural environment. Edward Velarde's specialized center, Solange reads at the discreet entrance, and then she understands where they are and why Matthew has brought them here. The staff receives the group with evident deference. They guide the board members and Solange through bright corridors decorated with contemporary American art to a conference room overlooking a Zen garden. Matthew waits for them there, dressed unusually casually, dark trousers and a white shirt. No tie or jacket. "Thank you for coming," he greets, his gaze briefly lingering on Solange before addressing the board. "I know this summons is irregular, but it was necessary for you to see this place to understand what I am about to propose to you." The board members take their seats, visibly disconcerted. Danielle remains standing, her posture revealing barely contained tension. Matthew, "If this is some kind of emotional maneuver," she begins. "It's not a maneuver, Danielle," he interrupts her firmly. "It's a reminder of where we come from, of why we built all this." He turns to a screen on the wall and presses a button on a remote control. Images of the first Velarde hospital appear, inaugurated 30 years ago by his father. "My father founded Velarde hospitals with a clear vision to create medical institutions where technical excellence and human compassion were equally important," he explains. He was a businessman, yes, but also a humanist who believed in the inherent dignity of every patient. The images advance, showing the group's expansion, the acquisition of new centers, the implementation of advanced technologies. "And then the accident happened," Matthew continues, his voice slightly more tense. "My brother Edward suffered severe brain damage. My father fell into depression and eventually suffered a fatal heart attack. My mother went into exile in Europe. And I took the reins of the business with a single obsession, absolute control." He pauses, looking at each of those present. "I transformed my father's dream into a machine of clinical efficiency and financial profitability. And it worked. We tripled revenues, doubled the number of hospitals, implemented protocols that are studied in business schools around the world." Danielle nods, as if saying exactly, but Matthew is not finished. "But somewhere along the way, I lost something essential," he continues. "The original vision, the balance between efficiency and humanity. The understanding that a hospital is not just a business. It is a sanctuary where science and human suffering meet." The room remains silent. Some board members seem uncomfortable, others intrigued. Danielle observes Matthew with a mixture of frustration and genuine concern. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Mr. Javier finally asks. "A fundamental restructuring," Matthew replies. "Not of our financial model, which remains solid, but of our operational philosophy. I want Velarde Hospitals to regain its original mission, to provide excellent medical care without sacrificing human dignity on the altar of profitability." He then presents a detailed plan. Review of terminal patient care protocols, expansion of psychological support programs for families, implementation of an evaluation system that values both medical outcomes and the patient's human experience. "This will reduce our profit margins in the short term," he admits, "but it will ensure our long-term sustainability, both financially and ethically." Danielle finally intervenes, her voice controlled but with an edge of urgency. "Shareholders will not accept a reduction in profits based on renewed sentimentality," she argues. "We have fiduciary responsibilities. We also have moral responsibilities," Matthew replies. "And if the shareholders don't understand that, I am prepared to buy their shares. In fact, I have instructed my lawyers to prepare the necessary documentation." The statement drops like a bomb in the room. Matthew Velarde, always the pragmatist, willing to invest a personal fortune for a change in corporate philosophy. "It's unheard of. This is insane," Danielle murmurs. "All for—" She stops, looking at Solange, who has remained silent throughout the presentation. The implicit accusation is clear. "No, Danielle," Matthew says calmly. "It's not for Solange. She was the catalyst, yes. But this is for me, for the man I promised to be and forgot, for my father, for Edward." He then turns to the side door and gestures. A nurse enters, pushing a wheelchair where a man in his 30s sits. He has Matthew's same angular face, the same dark eyes but empty of the intensity that characterizes the elder Velarde. His body is thin, almost fragile, and his hands rest motionless in his lap. "My brother Edward," Matthew introduces, an unprecedented vulnerability in his voice. "The reason I built all this, and also the reason I almost forgot why I was building it." A reverent silence fills the room. Even Danielle seems affected by Edward's presence. This man-child whose accident redefined the trajectory of an entire family, and by extension, of a medical empire. Matthew kneels beside his brother's chair and takes his inert hand. "I failed him once, many years ago in that lake," he says, no longer caring to hide the emotion in his voice. "And I have continued to fail him ever since, paying for his care but never truly caring for him. Delegating my responsibility to excellent doctors and nurses, but strangers to him." He looks up at the board. "I will not continue to fail him, nor the thousands of patients who trust us, nor the original vision of Velarde hospitals." He stands up and walks towards Solange, extending his hand to her in a gesture that surprises everyone present. "This woman, Solange Gutierrez, reminded me of what I had forgotten," he says as she, after a moment of hesitation, accepts his hand and rises to join him. That every executive decision affects real lives. That behind every file there is a human story. That efficiency without compassion is not progress, it is simply cruelty disguised as business logic. Solange feels all eyes on her, especially Danielle's, laden with contradictory emotions. But what strikes her most is the transformation in Matthew's face. The mask has completely fallen, revealing the man her mother knew years ago, the young man who read poetry in hospital rooms and dreamed of making the medical world a more humane place. "The board will vote on my proposal next week," Matthew continues, "and I will respect their decision. But I want them to do so with a full understanding of what is at stake, not just the financial future of Velarde hospitals, but its soul." With these words, he concludes the meeting. The board members begin to leave, some visibly moved, others still skeptical. Danielle is the last to head for the door, her expression unreadable. "Daniela," Matthew calls her. "Can we talk privately?" She nods curtly and waits while the others leave. Solange makes a move to leave too, but Matthew gently retains her hand. "Stay, please," he asks. "This concerns you too." Once the three of them are alone, with Edward still present in his chair near the window, Matthew addresses Danielle with raw honesty. "I know you think I'm making a mistake," he says, "that I'm letting emotions cloud my judgment, that I'm betraying everything we built together." "Not only do I think so, I know so," she replies, her voice mixing frustration and something akin to pain. "I've seen you lead this company for a decade. I know your capabilities, your vision, your determination, and now it seems you're willing to risk everything for, what exactly? Redemption? Nostalgia? Or for her?" Her gaze briefly shifts to Solange, who remains silent, aware that this conversation has much deeper roots than she can fully comprehend. "For integrity," Matthew replies simply. "To regain congruence between what we do and why we do it." Danielle shakes her head, incredulous. "I always admired your pragmatism, Matthew. Your ability to make difficult decisions when no one else dared. To put the greater good before individual needs. It was what made you extraordinary." "It made me effective," he corrects, "not necessarily a better person." "And that's what you want now? To be a better person, even if it means being less effective?" The question hangs between them, laden with implications. Solange observes the exchange, understanding that she is witnessing not only a strategic discussion, but the unraveling of a deeply complex relationship, built on foundations of professional respect, mutual dependence, and perhaps something that was never allowed to fully blossom. "I want to be whole," Matthew finally replies, "and I believe I can be both, effective and humane. My father was." Danielle remains silent for a moment, studying the man in front of her as if seeing him for the first time. "You've always had this internal battle," she finally says, "between the ruthless executive and the idealist you hid. I thought you had resolved that conflict, that you had chosen a path and found peace in it." "It wasn't peace, Danielle," Matthew replies with painful honesty. "It was anesthesia. I had numbed myself so much that I no longer felt the cost of my decisions." Solange finally intervenes, her voice soft but firm. "Ms. Mondragon, I am not here to destabilize the company or to manipulate Matthew," she says, surprising both of them by using his first name so naturally. "It was never my intention to cause any of these changes." Danielle looks at her intently. "Then what was your intention, Solange Gutierrez? Why did you keep returning to his office night after night?" "At first to understand," she replies sincerely. "To see the face behind the signature that denied my mother treatment. Then, to connect with the man my mother knew, who read her poetry and held her hand. The man she believed would one day remember his humanity. And now?" Danielle presses. Solange looks at Matthew, then at Edward in his chair, and finally back at Danielle. "Now, to close a circle," she says, "so that the story that began between my mother and Matthew years ago, which continued without either of them knowing through corporate decisions and unsent letters, can finally find its proper conclusion." Danielle observes them both for a long moment. Something in her expression subtly changes, as if she is accepting a painful but inevitable truth. "I cannot support this direction, Matthew," she finally says. "Not professionally. I believe it's a strategic mistake that could cost millions and jeopardize the future of the company." Matthew nods, accepting her position. "I understand. But personally," Danielle pauses, searching for the right words. "Personally, I think you are finally facing the ghost that has haunted you all these years. And perhaps that is worth any financial cost." She heads towards the door, but before leaving she adds, "My resignation will be on your desk tomorrow. Not because I don't believe in you, but because you need to surround yourself with people who fully share this new vision. And I will always be the voice of pragmatism you tried to silence." "I don't want your resignation, Danielle," Matthew replies. "I want your honesty. I've always valued it, even when we disagree." She smiles slightly, a gesture that contains both sadness and acceptance. "I'll think about it," she concedes, and with a final evaluative glance at Solange, she leaves. The silence that follows her departure is profound but not uncomfortable. Matthew approaches Edward's chair and kneels beside him again. "I want to show you something," he says to Solange, gesturing for her to come closer. "Or rather, someone." Solange approaches cautiously. She has never been near a person with severe brain damage, and she doesn't know what to expect. Edward Velarde has a relaxed, almost serene face. His eyes, though open, seem to look towards a place only he can see. "Edward, this is Solange," Matthew says, with a tenderness Solange had never heard from him. "Hope's daughter. Do you remember I told you about her? The lady who taught me about dignity when I needed it most." To Solange's surprise, Edward blinks slowly, as if something in those words had penetrated the fog of his altered consciousness. "Doctors say he understands more than he can express," Matthew explains. "That he's there, trapped in a body that no longer fully responds to his will." Solange kneels too, coming to Edward's level. Something in his face reminds her of the children she dreamed of teaching when she studied to be a teacher. That pure vulnerability, that need to be truly seen. "Hello, Edward," she greets softly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." A solitary tear rolls down Edward's cheek, surprising even Matthew, who quickly wipes it away with his thumb. "He likes you," he says hoarsely. "He has good judgment for people. He always did." Solange feels her own heart expand painfully. In that moment, she fully understands the weight Matthew has carried all these years. Not just the guilt for the accident, but the responsibility for a life that continues in a limbo between consciousness and incapacity. "Do you come to see him often?" she asks. Matthew shakes his head, shame evident on his face. "Not enough. Barely a few times a year, usually on significant dates. It hurts too much. It's a constant reminder of my greatest failure." "I don't think he sees it that way," Solange responds. "I think every time you come, it's a gift to him." "How can you know that?" "Because that's how I felt every time someone visited my mother in the hospital," she explains. "As if that day, for a few hours, we weren't alone in the universe. As if someone else shared the burden, even if it was just by sitting silently beside us." Matthew looks at her with a gratitude that transcends words. Without thinking, he takes her hand, a simple gesture but laden with meaning. For the first time since they met, there are no barriers between them. Not the imposing desk, not the roles of boss and employee, not the secrets or hidden agendas. Just two people connected by threads of fate that now begin to consciously intertwine. There's something I want to ask you, Matthew finally says, about the position in the educational program. I don't need charity, Matthew, Solange responds firmly. If you offered me that job out of pity or guilt... No, he interrupts her. I offered it because it's exactly what we need. Educators who understand the intersection between learning and healing. People who have experienced both worlds. I reviewed your academic record. You were an exceptional student before your mother's illness forced you to drop out. Solange considers his words. The position would represent a new beginning, the opportunity to resume part of the dream she abandoned when Hope's illness consumed everything. I'll think about it, she finally says. But I need to know it's for my merits, not for whatever is emerging between us. Matthew nods, understanding and respecting her position. That's fair, he concedes. In fact, I want to propose something. If you decide to accept the position, I will completely respect the professional separation. No favoritism, no exceptions. You will report to the program director, not to me. And the other thing? Solange asks, referring to the personal connection they both feel, but neither has named yet. That, Matthew pauses, searching for the right words, that we can explore at its own pace. Without pressure, without expectations. Just two people getting to know each other outside the shadows of the past. The proposal is measured, respectful, almost shy, coming from a man accustomed to taking what he desires. Solange appreciates this new Matthew, this man who is learning to balance control with vulnerability, determination with flexibility. That sounds like a good start. She accepts. Edward makes a soft sound, almost like a sigh, attracting both Matthew's and Solange's attention. His eyes seem more focused now, as if he is truly present in the room with them. Look, Matthew points, emotional. He's smiling. I haven't seen him smile in years. It's true. A small but unmistakable smile curves Edward's lips. Solange feels a wave of inexplicable emotion, as if they are receiving a silent blessing. Perhaps he understands what's happening better than we do, she suggests. He was always the more intuitive of the two, Matthew admits. I was the rational, the calculator. He was pure emotion, pure life. He looks at his brother with a love so deep and so laden with pain that Solange feels her own heart contract. In that moment, she understands that Matthew's journey of healing is just beginning, that the transformation they have started these days is only the first step on a much longer path, a path that perhaps they can walk together. What happens now? She asks, referring not just to them, but to everything, the company, the proposed changes, the uncertain future opening before them. Matthew looks towards the Zen garden visible from the window, where the wind creates ephemeral patterns in the meticulously raked sand. I don't know for sure, he admits, but for the first time in many years, I don't feel fear in the face of that uncertainty. I feel a possibility. Solange nods, understanding exactly what he means. After years of existing in the limbo between pain and survival, she also feels a new horizon opening before her. A horizon where her mother's legacy continues in unexpected ways, where the circle begun years ago finally finds its closure. And perhaps its new beginning. Time, Edward suddenly says, his voice hoarse from disuse, surprising both Matthew and Solange. Time it recommends. Matthew leans towards his brother, incredulous. Eddie, what did you say? Time, Edward repeats with effort. Time recommences. Matthew looks at Solange, bewildered. She smiles, intuitively understanding. I think he's saying that time recommences, she interprets. That now is a new beginning. Edward nods weakly, confirming her interpretation. Matthew, overwhelmed with emotion, carefully embraces his brother, as if fearing to break him. It is a moment of pure connection, without barriers or pretensions, just the fraternal love that has persisted through tragedy and separation. Solange observes the scene with a full heart. She thinks of her mother, of the unsent letters finally read, of the circles the universe draws for souls to find their way back to each other. She thinks of the decisions that define us and how sometimes destiny offers us a second chance to redefine ourselves. Time recommences. In those two words, spoken with difficulty by Edward after years of silence, Solange finds a profound truth. Time not only passes, it also heals, transforms, connects, and sometimes, if we are fortunate, it allows